What school announcement forever changed every student's life? The crackling voice over the intercom made my stomach drop before Principal Morrison even finished his first sentence. Good morning, Lincoln High. Due to unexpected budget constraints, we regret to inform you that Mr. Chen will no longer be continuing as our drama department instructor. His classes will be covered by substitute teachers for the remainder of the semester. I watched my AP literature textbook slip from my numb fingers and hit the floor with a thud that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent classroom. Around me, 26 other students sat frozen, processing what we'd just heard. Sarah Martinez, who'd been practicing her Lady Macbeth monologue just that morning, had tears streaming down her cheeks. That's it. Marcus whispered from behind me. That's all they're going to say about Mr. Chen. Mrs. Peterson cleared her throat awkwardly at the front of the room. Well, let's continue with our discussion of Chapter 12. But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was spinning back to yesterday afternoon, when Mr. Chen had been his usual energetic self, helping me work through a particularly difficult scene from our spring production of The Crucible. He'd spent an extra hour after school with me, patiently explaining how to channel authentic emotion into my portrayal of John Proctor. Remember, Alex, he'd said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses the way he always did when he was really focused, the best performances come from truth. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable up there. Now he was just gone. Without warning, without explanation, without even getting to say goodbye. The lunch bell couldn't ring fast enough. I practically sprinted to the drama room, hoping against hope that this was all some terrible mistake. But when I pushed through the familiar double doors, I found Ms. Patterson, a substitute who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world, sitting at Mr. Chen's desk. Excuse me, she said sharply as I entered. This room is off limits during lunch. But I always eat lunch here. We're rehearsing for. Not anymore. All after-school activities have been suspended indefinitely. My heart sank. The spring musical auditions were supposed to be next week. We'd been preparing for months. Mr. Chen had promised me the lead, had been coaching me since September, believing in my potential when even I didn't think I was good enough. I found the rest of the drama kids clustered around the benches outside the cafeteria, looking shell-shocked. Emma Chen, no relation, despite sharing the last name, was clutching a crumpled tissue, her usually perfect stage makeup smeared. Did anyone know this was coming? Jake asked, running his hands through his hair. Any warning at all? We all shook our heads. That was the thing, Mr. Chen had seemed completely normal yesterday. Happy, even. He'd been talking excitedly about his plans for our spring showcase, had mentioned ordering new lighting equipment for the theater. Something's not right, I said quietly. This doesn't add up. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Think about it. Budget constraints. The drama department brings in more money than it costs with ticket sales. And why wouldn't they give us any notice? Why wouldn't they let him say goodbye? Emma nodded slowly. My mom works in the district office. She would have heard about budget cuts weeks ago. So what are you saying? Marcus asked. I looked around at my friends, these people who'd become family over the past 4 years, who'd found their voices and confidence under Mr. Chen's guidance just like I had. I'm saying we need to find out what really happened. The first real clue came from the most unexpected source, Principal Morrison's own secretary. Mrs. Rodriguez had worked at Lincoln High for 23 years, and she always had a soft spot for the drama kids. We'd performed at her daughter's quinceanera last spring, and she'd been sneaking us leftover birthday cake from office parties since I was a freshman. When I knocked on the main office door at 3:47 p.m. that Thursday, she glanced around nervously before motioning me inside. Mijo, you shouldn't be asking about this, she whispered, but her eyes were sad and angry in a way I'd never seen before. But that man, he didn't deserve what happened. Mrs. Rodriguez, please. We just want to understand. Mr. Chen was fine on Tuesday. What changed? She pulled me behind a tall filing cabinet where we couldn't be seen from Principal Morrison's office window. It wasn't budget cuts, Alex. The district approved our funding request for next year just last Friday. $47,000 for arts programs, including a $3,000 increase for drama department supplies. My stomach churned. Then why? Because Principal Morrison saw something he didn't like. Her voice dropped even lower. Tuesday evening, around 6:30 p.m. Your teacher was leaving the building with another man. Someone he introduced as his partner when they ran into Morrison in the parking lot. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd suspected Mr. Chen might be gay, not that it mattered to any of us students, but he'd always kept his personal life private. In a conservative town like ours, I could understand why. Morrison fired him for that. I could barely keep my voice down. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Called it conduct unbecoming of an educator and not suitable for our family-oriented environment. Had HR draft termination papers by Wednesday morning. The budget story was just what they told everyone else. Rage bubbled up in my chest, hot and immediate. That's illegal. You can't fire someone for being gay. Not in Texas, you can't, she said quietly. Not without proof of actual misconduct. So they made up the budget crisis, processed it as a layoff instead of termination. Clean paperwork, no legal issues. But you know the truth. I know the truth. I also know I've got 2 years until retirement and a mortgage to pay. She looked genuinely pained. I'm sorry, Alex. I wish I could do more. Walking home that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma, found Mr. Chen's address. We're going to check on him. Meet us at Maple and 5th in 20 minutes. When I arrived, I found not just Emma, but Sarah, Marcus, Jake, and 6 other drama kids huddled on the sidewalk outside a small duplex with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. Through the thin walls, we could hear what sounded like packing, the scrape of boxes across floors, the rustle of papers. He's moving, Sarah whispered. Mrs. Chen, Emma, heard from her mom that he's applied for jobs in California and Oregon. He wants to leave Texas entirely. When? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. His lease ends March 15th, Marcus said, checking his phone. That's exactly 3 weeks from today. I stared at the house where the teacher who changed all our lives was apparently packing up his dreams and running away from the bigotry that had destroyed his career. 3 weeks wasn't much time, but maybe, just maybe, it was enough. Guys, I said slowly, an idea beginning to form in my mind, what if we made sure the whole school knew the real reason Mr. Chen was fired? Emma's eyes widened. Alex, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Principal Morrison is about to learn that when you mess with our teacher, you mess with all of us. The plan started forming over pizza at Tony's that Friday night. 9 of us crammed into a corner booth, notebooks spread across the red checkered tablecloth, speaking in hushed voices between bites of pepperoni. Okay, so we expose Morrison during morning announcements somehow, Emma said, twirling cheese around her finger. But how do we actually get access to the PA system? My girlfriend works in the main office during second period, Jake offered. She files attendance reports. Sarah shook her head. Too risky. They'd stop us before we got 2 sentences out. I'd been quiet, thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez's words, about the hurt in her eyes when she told me the truth. What if we didn't need the PA system? What if we made our own announcement? Marcus looked up from his notebook where he'd been sketching out timeline ideas. What do you mean? The school board meeting. They're held in the main auditorium on the 3rd Tuesday of every month, right? Public forum starts at 7 p.m. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the district website. March 19th. That's exactly 1 week before Mr. Chen's lease expires. But nobody pays attention to school board meetings, Emma protested. It's just boring budget stuff and policy changes. Not if we give them something worth paying attention to, I said, the idea crystallizing in my mind. What if the entire student body showed up? What if we made it impossible for them to ignore what really happened? Jake raised an eyebrow. You want to get the whole school to attend a board meeting on a Tuesday night? I want to get the whole school to walk out of classes Tuesday morning and march straight to that meeting. In solidarity with Mr. Chen. The table went quiet except for the ambient noise of clinking dishes and muffled conversations around us. Sarah was the first to speak. Alex, that's huge. You're talking about coordinating over 1,200 students. And getting them all to risk suspension, Marcus added. For something that might not even work, Emma finished. I leaned forward, my voice urgent. But what if it does work? What if we make so much noise that the board has no choice but to investigate? What if local news shows up because 1,200 teenagers are demanding justice for their teacher? The energy at the table shifted. I could see it in their faces, the transition from skepticism to possibility. We'd need proof, Sarah said slowly. Not just rumors or hearsay. Actual evidence that Morrison fired him for being gay. Mrs. Rodriguez keeps copies of all termination paperwork, I said. Including the real reason before they rewrote it as budget cuts. She'll never give that to us, Jake said. She's too close to retirement. She won't have to give it to us. I pulled up another page on my phone. Texas Public Information Act. All employment records for public school teachers are accessible through formal request. Takes 5 to 10 business days to process. Emma's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. We file the request Monday morning, get the real documentation by the following week. But we need more than just paperwork, Marcus said, always the practical one. We need Morrison to incriminate himself somehow. Get him to admit what he really did. Leave that to me, I said, remembering something. Morrison loves his weekly coffee meetings with student council president candidates. Campaign season starts Monday, and I've been thinking about running. Sarah grinned. You sneaky bastard. You're going to wear a wire. Phone recording app. Completely legal in Texas as long as one party consents. I looked around the table at my friends, my fellow drama kids who'd learned from Mr. Chen that sometimes the most important performances happen off the stage. So are we really doing this? One by one, they nodded. Emma raised her Coke can in a toast. For Mr. Chen, she said. For Mr. Chen, we echoed, and I knew there was no turning back now. The recording device felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket as I sat across from Principal Morrison in his office that Monday morning. His coffee mug, emblazoned with "World's Greatest Principal" in fading blue letters, sat between us like a barrier while he shuffled through what I assumed were my fake student council application materials. So, Alex, what makes you think you'd be a good fit for student body president? Morrison asked, not bothering to look up from the papers. I forced a smile, trying to channel the confidence Mr. Chen had spent years teaching me. I believe in standing up for what's right, sir. Making sure every student has a voice, especially when they're facing difficult situations. Something in my tone must have caught his attention because his pale blue eyes flicked up to meet mine. What kind of difficult situations? Well, like what happened with Mr. Chen. I kept my voice carefully neutral, hitting record on the app behind my back. A lot of students are pretty upset about losing him so suddenly. Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Budget cuts are unfortunate, but necessary. We have to make hard choices to keep this district financially sound. Of course, I nodded sympathetically. Though I heard from someone in the district office that we actually got increased funding for arts programs this year. $47,000, including a bump for drama supplies. The coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. For just a moment, his carefully composed mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. Where exactly did you hear that, Alex? Oh, just around. You know how rumors spread. I leaned forward slightly. But between you and me, sir, some of the students are asking questions. They're wondering if there might have been other reasons for Mr. Chen's departure. Morrison set down his mug with a sharp clink. What kind of other reasons? Well, Jake Morrison, no relation, I assume, mentioned seeing Mr. Chen leaving school with another man last Tuesday. The same day he was fired, actually. Jake thought it was weird timing. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Morrison's face had gone from friendly administrator to something much more dangerous. Are you attempting to blackmail me, Alex? What? No, sir, I just. Because what David Chen does in his personal time is exactly why he's no longer employed here. The words came out sharp and bitter. This is a family-oriented institution. We have standards to maintain, values to uphold. Parents trust us to provide appropriate role models for their children. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid it would interfere with the recording. So it wasn't really about budget cuts. Morrison stood up abruptly, towering over me. This conversation is over. And Alex? If I were you, I'd focus on my own academic performance instead of spreading malicious gossip about former employees. I stumbled out of his office with my hands shaking, but the phone in my pocket held pure gold. Morrison had just confessed to firing Mr. Chen for being gay, and I had it all on tape. By lunchtime, the recording was making its way through a carefully selected network of students. Emma had burned it onto CDs, Marcus was uploading it to SoundCloud, and Sarah was typing up a transcript. But our celebration was cut short when Jake burst into the drama room where we'd been planning. Guys, we have a problem, he panted, looking like he'd run across campus. Morrison just called an emergency assembly for tomorrow morning. He's announcing a new character and values initiative for the school. Emma paled. He knows we're planning something. Gets worse, Jake continued. He's invited parents and local church leaders to attend, including Reverend Patterson from First Baptist and Councilman Wright from the city council. My stomach dropped. Morrison wasn't just trying to stop us, he was doubling down. He was turning our planned walkout into a public battle between family values and what he'd paint as teenage rebellion. There's something else, Jake added quietly. My girlfriend overheard Morrison on the phone with someone from the district office. They're fast-tracking a replacement for Mr. Chen. Someone from the state-approved curriculum board who specializes in traditional educational values. Sarah slumped in her chair. They're not just covering their tracks. They're making sure nothing like this ever happens again. I stared out the window toward the parking lot where Mr. Chen used to park his little Honda Civic and felt something harden in my chest. Morrison thought he could intimidate us into backing down. He thought he could turn our community against us before we even had a chance to tell the truth. He was about to learn just how much Mr. Chen had taught us about fighting for what we believed in. We need to move up the timeline, I announced to the group gathered in Emma's basement that Tuesday evening. Her parents thought we were having a study session for AP history, which wasn't entirely a lie, we were definitely about to make some history. The assembly is tomorrow at 9 a.m., Sarah said, pacing back and forth across the carpet. Morrison's going to have Reverend Patterson talk about moral guidance and Councilman Wright discussing community standards. It's a complete setup. Marcus looked up from his laptop where he'd been monitoring social media. It's working, too. My mom got 3 calls today from other parents asking if she knew about the inappropriate influence some students were planning to bring into the school. I felt sick. Morrison was spinning this perfectly, painting us as the troublemakers before we'd even made our move. What about the public records request? Still processing, Emma replied, checking her email for the dozenth time. They have until Friday to respond, but that'll be too late if Morrison gets his character initiative approved tomorrow. Jake had been unusually quiet, hunched over his phone in the corner. When he finally looked up, his expression was grim. Guys, I just got a text from my girlfriend. Morrison's not just bringing in outside speakers tomorrow. What do you mean? I asked. He's got 3 school board members coming to observe and evaluate the current climate at Lincoln High, including Mrs. Henderson, who chairs the personnel committee. The room went dead silent. Mrs. Henderson was notorious for being Morrison's biggest supporter on the board. If she was coming to evaluate the school climate, it meant Morrison was setting up a narrative where any student protest would look like proof that we needed stricter control and more traditional values. This is chess, I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place in my mind. He's not just defending himself, he's using this whole situation to consolidate power. Get the board to approve his character initiative, bring in his hand-picked replacement for Mr. Chen, and paint anyone who objects as troublemakers. Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and went pale. Alex, you need to see this. She held up her screen showing a text from her mom, heard about some students causing problems at school. Hope you're staying out of trouble. Dad and I will be attending tomorrow's assembly to show support for Principal Morrison's new initiative. One by one, our phones started buzzing with similar messages. Parents who'd been contacted by Morrison's network, convinced that their children needed protection from some kind of corrupting influence at school. He's turning our own families against us, Marcus said quietly. Sarah slumped onto the couch. Maybe we should just wait. Let the records request come through, try to find another way. No. The word came out harder than I intended. Everyone looked at me. If we wait, Mr. Chen will be gone. His lease expires in 2 weeks, and Morrison will have his new traditional values teacher installed by then. This character initiative passes tomorrow, and we'll never get another chance. But Alex, Emma said gently, look at the numbers. Half the student body's parents will be at that assembly watching for any sign of rebellion. If we walk out, we're not just risking suspension, we're giving Morrison exactly the ammunition he needs to prove his point. I stood up and walked to the small basement window, looking out at the suburban street where porch lights were starting to flicker on. Somewhere across town, Mr. Chen was probably packing another box, preparing to leave the community where he'd dedicated 5 years of his life to helping kids like us find their voices. Then we don't walk out, I said, turning back to face my friends. We do something Morrison will never see coming. Jake raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? A smile spread across my face as the plan crystallized. We give him exactly the kind of assembly he wants. Complete with moral guidance, community values, and a very public demonstration of character. We crash his own event, Emma breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. We crash his own event, I confirmed. And we do it using everything Mr. Chen taught us about the power of performance. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching the knot of anxiety in my stomach as I watched parents and community leaders file into our school auditorium at 8:45 a.m. Reverend Patterson's silver Mercedes was parked right next to Councilman Wright's pristine pickup truck in the visitor spots, while Mrs. Henderson stepped out of a black sedan with 2 other board members I recognized from district meetings. Morrison had orchestrated this perfectly. The auditorium was filling with exactly the audience he wanted, conservative parents, religious leaders, and school board members who already shared his worldview. They'd come expecting to hear about protecting their children from dangerous influences, and Morrison was about to give them a show. Alex, you sure about this? Emma whispered as we took our seats in the third row, close enough to be seen but not so close as to draw immediate suspicion. Around us, our carefully positioned allies sat scattered throughout the audience, 23 drama kids, 12 choir students, 8 members of the debate team, and surprisingly, 15 athletes who decided to join us after hearing the recording of Morrison's confession. Too late to back out now, I murmured, checking my phone one last time. Marcus was stationed in the back with the video camera we borrowed from the journalism club. Sarah and Jake flanked the side exits with printed copies of the transcript. Emma had the portable speaker hidden in her backpack, queued up to Morrison's recorded confession. At exactly 9 a.m., Morrison stepped up to the podium wearing his best navy suit and most pastoral smile. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important discussion about maintaining the values that make Lincoln High a beacon of excellence in our community. Polite applause rippled through the audience. I spotted my own parents in the fifth row, looking uncomfortable but dutiful. They'd gotten the same phone calls as everyone else, the same carefully worded concerns about outside influences and age-inappropriate discussions happening in school. Before we hear from our distinguished guests, Morrison continued, I want to address some rumors that have been circulating about recent personnel changes. Let me be absolutely clear, every decision made by this administration is guided by our commitment to fiscal responsibility and educational excellence. More applause, stronger this time. Morrison was hitting all the right notes for this audience. With that in mind, I'm proud to announce our new Character and Values Initiative, designed to ensure that Lincoln High continues to provide the moral guidance our children deserve. Reverend Patterson nodded approvingly from his front row seat. Mrs. Henderson was already taking notes on her tablet, probably drafting the board resolution that would formalize Morrison's power grab. Now I'd like to invite Reverend Patterson to share his thoughts on the importance of traditional values in education. This was it. As the Reverend approached the microphone, I caught Emma's eye and nodded once. She reached into her backpack. But before her fingers could find the speaker, something unexpected happened. The auditorium doors burst open, and Mrs. Rodriguez walked in carrying a manila folder and looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Morrison's face went white as his secretary marched down the center aisle, ignoring the confused murmurs from the audience. She stopped directly in front of the stage and held up the folder. Principal Morrison, she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent auditorium, I have the employment documentation you requested for the board review. Including the original termination report for David Chen, dated February 26, citing conduct unbecoming due to personal lifestyle choices inappropriate for educational environment. The temperature in the room plummeted. Morrison gripped the podium so hard his knuckles went white. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is neither the time nor the place. And the revised report dated February 27, she continued, opening the folder, citing budget constraints and program reduction as the reason for termination. Both signed by you, both in direct contradiction to the district's approved funding increase of $47,000 for arts programs. Reverend Patterson's mouth fell open. Mrs. Henderson's tablet slipped from her fingers. Around the auditorium, parents began looking at each other with growing confusion and anger. I realized Mrs. Rodriguez had just handed us something more powerful than any plan we could have devised. She'd given us the truth, delivered by the one person in the building whose integrity no one could question. Morrison was about to discover that sometimes the most devastating performances are completely unscripted. The auditorium erupted into chaos. Parents were shouting questions, board members were frantically whispering to each other, and Morrison looked like he was about to have a complete meltdown at the podium. But Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't finished. There's more, she announced, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Principal Morrison, would you like to explain to these parents why you told the district office that Mr. Chen was terminated for creating an unsafe environment through promotion of alternative lifestyle choices? Because I have that email right here, sent to Superintendent Williams at 11:47 p.m. on February 26. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely think straight. This was better than anything we'd planned, but it was also spiraling completely out of control. Morrison's carefully orchestrated assembly was turning into his worst nightmare, and I wasn't sure any of us were prepared for what came next. That's enough. Morrison finally found his voice, stepping away from the podium toward Mrs. Rodriguez. You're out of line, and you're fired, effective immediately. You can't fire me for telling the truth, she replied calmly, though I could see her hands shaking as she held the folder. Especially not in front of 3 school board members and half the parents in this district. Mrs. Henderson stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger, but I couldn't tell if she was angry at Morrison or at Mrs. Rodriguez for disrupting his presentation. This is highly irregular. We need to adjourn this meeting immediately, Anne. No. The word came from an unexpected source. My own mother had risen from her seat in the 5th row, and her teacher voice, the one she used to control rowdy second graders, filled the auditorium. I want to hear what's in that folder. My son has been devastated about losing Mr. Chen, and if there's more to this story, we deserve to know. A murmur of agreement rippled through the parents' section. Morrison was losing control of his narrative, and fast. This is a coordinated attack on my administration, Morrison said desperately, his voice rising to an almost frantic pitch. Mrs. Rodriguez has been influenced by a group of students who are trying to undermine the moral authority of this institution. They've been spreading lies, Anne. What lies? Emma called out from her seat, standing up with her phone in hand. You mean like this recording from yesterday morning? Before anyone could stop her, she hit play on the portable speaker. Morrison's voice filled the auditorium, crystal clear and undeniably his. This is a family-oriented institution. We have standards to maintain, values to uphold. What David Chen does in his personal time is exactly why he's no longer employed here. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the board members looked stunned. Reverend Patterson was staring at Morrison like he'd never seen him before. Parents throughout the auditorium were pulling out their phones, some clearly recording, others frantically texting. But Morrison wasn't done fighting. His face had gone from pale to red, and when he spoke again, his voice carried an edge of desperation I'd never heard before. You want to know the truth, he shouted, abandoning the podium entirely. Fine. David Chen was fired because he was flaunting an inappropriate relationship in front of students and faculty. This school will not be turned into a platform for promoting deviant behavior to impressionable teenagers. The words hung in the air like poison. Several parents gasped audibly. Mrs. Henderson looked like she wanted to disappear into her seat. And in the back of the auditorium, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. A local news camera had appeared at some point during the chaos, and it was recording everything. Morrison had just destroyed his career on live television, but he'd also declared war on every LGBTQ+ student in our school. This wasn't going to end with his resignation. This was going to get so much worse before it got better. And Mr. Chin still had no idea any of this was happening. The news van in the parking lot should have been my first clue that this was about to explode beyond anything we'd imagined. By the time I made it to my locker after the assembly from hell, my phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Emma was practically hyperventilating by the water fountains. "Alex, we're trending," she said, shoving her phone in my face. #Lincoln High Homophobia has 12,000 tweets in the last 2 hours. Someone live-streamed the whole thing on TikTok and it already has 200,000 views. I scrolled through the comments, my stomach sinking with each one. Sure, there were plenty supporting us, calling Morrison a bigot, demanding his resignation, praising Mrs. Rodriguez for her courage. But there were just as many on the other side, and they were vicious. Perverted agenda pushed by liberal students. Fire every teacher who supports this filth. Parents need to take back our schools from these degenerates. It's getting worse, Marcus said, appearing beside us with his laptop. Channel 7 just posted the full video on YouTube. Morrison's meltdown is going viral, but so are the counter-protests. There's already a Facebook group called Support Principal Morrison with 800 members. My blood turned to ice. Counter-protests. 3 different church groups are organizing a rally for tomorrow morning. Right here on campus. They're calling it Stand for Traditional Values and demanding that the school board not only keep Morrison but expand his character initiative district-wide. The hallway around us had gone strangely quiet. I looked up to see other students watching us with expressions ranging from supportive to hostile. Jennifer Walsh, whose father was a deacon at First Baptist, was staring at me like I'd personally insulted her family. Tommy Peterson, who'd been in drama club freshman year, gave me a subtle thumbs up before hurrying away. "Where's Sarah?" I asked, suddenly realizing our group was incomplete. Emma's face crumpled. Her parents pulled her out of school an hour ago. They saw the news coverage and decided she was getting caught up with the wrong crowd. She's not allowed to see any of us anymore. The weight of what we'd unleashed was starting to hit me. This wasn't just about Mr. Chin anymore. We'd started a culture war, and everyone in our community was being forced to pick sides. Alex Chin. A woman's voice made me turn around. She was holding a press badge and a recording device, flanked by a cameraman. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. Can we talk about your role in organizing today's protest?" Before I could answer, Jake appeared out of nowhere and grabbed my arm. "Don't say anything. My dad's a lawyer. He says we need to be careful about making statements while this is still developing." "Developing how?" I asked, but the reporter answered first. "The school board called an emergency session for tonight at 7 p.m. They're voting on Principal Morrison's immediate suspension pending investigation, but also on whether to implement enhanced disciplinary measures for students involved in today's disruption. That could include expulsion for up to 15 students." My mouth went dry. Expulsion. The board is under enormous pressure from both sides. Conservative parents are threatening to pull their kids out if Morrison is fired. Progressive parents are threatening lawsuits if he's not. The district's insurance company is having emergency meetings about liability exposure. She held out the recording device. "So I'll ask again, what was your role in planning today's events, and do you think the potential consequences are worth it?" I stared at the device, knowing that whatever I said would be broadcast to thousands of people who'd already made up their minds about who I was and what I represented. But more importantly, I realized with a sinking heart that we still hadn't accomplished what we'd set out to do. "Have any of you actually spoken to Mr. Chin?" I asked quietly. "Does he even know what happened today?" The reporter's expression shifted slightly. "Actually, we've been trying to reach him for comment, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. Neighbors say they haven't seen him since Tuesday." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, haven't seen him?" "His car's not in the driveway. Mail's piling up. Looks like he might have already left town." The words hit me like a physical blow. Mr. Chen was gone. While we'd been orchestrating this elaborate plan to save him, he'd already given up and left. All of this chaos, the viral videos, the death threats in my DMs, Sarah being pulled out of school, had been for nothing. "We have to find him," I said, pushing past the reporter and her cameraman. Emma and Marcus followed me toward the exit, but Jake caught my shoulder. "Alex, wait. Think about this logically. If he left Tuesday night after getting fired, he could be anywhere by now. California, Oregon, wherever he applied for jobs. Then we call those schools. We track him down. We. With what information?" Marcus interrupted gently. "We don't even know which districts he contacted." I wanted to scream. Everything was falling apart. Morrison might get reinstated with even more power. Mr. Chen was gone. My friends were facing expulsion. And I was standing in a hallway full of news cameras, completely out of ideas. That's when Mrs. Rodriguez appeared again, moving through the crowd of reporters with surprising authority for someone who'd just been fired on live television. "Alex," she called softly. "A word?" I followed her to an empty classroom, where she closed the door and pulled out her phone. "David, Mr. Chen, isn't gone," she said quietly. "He's staying at the Comfort Inn on Highway 6. Room 247. Has been since Wednesday morning." Hope surged through my chest. "He's still here. His apartment lease doesn't end until March 15th, but he couldn't stand being in that empty place after they terminated him. He's been holed up in that hotel room, barely leaving except for food. I've been checking on him." Her voice cracked slightly. "Bringing him groceries, making sure he's okay. He's not in a good place, Alex. Does he know what happened today?" Mrs. Rodriguez shook her head. "He turned off his phone Tuesday night. Said he couldn't handle any more bad news. He has no idea about the assembly, the recording, any of it. I felt a mix of relief and terror. Mr. Chen was still here, which meant we hadn't completely failed. But he was also isolated and depressed, hiding in a hotel room while the entire town argued about his sexuality on social media. Mrs. Rodriguez, what you did today was 23 years overdue, she said firmly. I've watched Morrison bully teachers, intimidate students, and manipulate parents for too long. When I saw those termination papers, when I heard him on the phone laughing about how he'd cleaned house of David's inappropriate influence, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Through the classroom window, I could see more news vans arriving in the parking lot. A small crowd of protesters had gathered near the main entrance, carrying signs that read, "Protect our children," and "Traditional values matter." Counter-protesters with rainbow flags were setting up across the street. What happens now? I asked. Now you decide what matters more, winning this fight or helping the person you started fighting for. She handed me a piece of paper with the hotel address. The board meeting is at 7 p.m. tonight. David's hearing about all this eventually, whether from you or from the morning news. Which way would be kinder? I stared at the address, realizing Mrs. Rodriguez was right. We'd gotten so caught up in exposing Morrison that we'd forgotten the most important thing. Mr. Chen was sitting alone in a hotel room, believing his career was over and his life was ruined. He deserved to hear the truth from us. He deserved to know that 1,200 students had seen his worth, even when the administration couldn't. Emma, I called as Mrs. Rodriguez slipped back into the hallway. Change of plans. We're going to see Mr. Chen. The Comfort Inn on Highway 6 looked exactly like the kind of place where broken dreams go to die. The parking lot was half empty, filled with the cars of traveling salesmen and people whose lives had taken unexpected detours. Mr. Chen's silver Honda Civic sat in spot 31, looking as defeated as I felt. Are you sure about this? Emma asked for the third time as we climbed the outdoor stairs to the second floor. Marcus carried a bag of Thai food from Mr. Chen's favorite restaurant, while Jake had insisted on bringing flowers, sunflowers, because Mr. Chen always said they reminded him that even the tallest things need strong roots. No, I admitted, stopping outside room 247. But we're here anyway. The door looked like it hadn't been painted in decades, and I could hear a television playing softly inside. CNN, from the sound of it. My heart sank. If he was watching the news, he might already know everything. I knocked gently. Mr. Chen. It's Alex. Alex Morrison from your AP drama class. The television went silent immediately. For a long moment, nothing happened, and I wondered if he was going to pretend he wasn't there. Then I heard the chain lock sliding, the deadbolt clicking, and the door opened just wide enough to reveal half of Mr. Chen's face. He looked terrible. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his wire-rimmed glasses were smudged, and he was wearing the same Lincoln High Drama Department t-shirt I'd seen him in Tuesday afternoon. But his eyes, those kind, encouraging eyes that had helped me find confidence I never knew I had, lit up when he saw us. What are you kids doing here? He asked softly, opening the door wider. How did you even find Mrs. Rodriguez? She's worried about you, Emma said. We all are. Mr. Chen stepped back to let us into the small room. 2 double beds, a tiny table, a chair that had seen better decades. The place smelled like industrial cleaning supplies and sadness. His laptop was open on the bed, surrounded by printed job applications and what looked like apartment listings from Oregon. You shouldn't be here, he said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. Your parents will be furious if they find out you're visiting the disgraced teacher who got fired for being inappropriate with students. That's not what happened, I said quickly. Mr. Chen, there's a lot you don't know about this week. He laughed bitterly. I know enough. I know I was stupid enough to introduce my partner to Morrison in the parking lot. I know I gave him exactly the ammunition he needed to destroy my career. I know that by Friday, everyone in town will know why I was really fired, and I'll never work in education again. Actually, Marcus said, setting down the Thai food, everyone in town already knows why you were fired. As of about 6 hours ago. Mr. Chen's face went white. What do you mean? Emma pulled out her phone and showed him the Twitter hashtag. We mean that Principal Morrison confessed to firing you for being gay in front of 300 parents, 3 school board members, and a live news camera this morning. We mean that Mrs. Rodriguez brought documented proof of his discrimination to a public assembly, Jake added. We mean that you're not the one whose career is over, I finished. Morrison is suspended pending investigation. The district's insurance company is in panic mode. And there are counter-protesters with rainbow flags in our school parking lot right now. Mr. Chen sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at Emma's phone as she scrolled through hundreds of supportive comments. I don't understand. How did all this happen? We happened, I said simply. The drama kids, the choir, debate team, even some of the football players. We couldn't let Morrison get away with what he did to you. For a moment, Mr. Chen just sat there processing everything. Then his shoulders started shaking, and I realized he was crying, not the sad, defeated tears I'd expected, but something that looked almost like relief. You kids, he said finally, looking up at us with those eyes that had always seen potential where others saw problems. You beautiful, brilliant, dangerous kids. Do you have any idea what you've done? Started a war, Marcus said grimly. Changed everything, Emma corrected. Brought you Thai food before it got cold, Jake added, trying to lighten the mood. Mr. Chen actually smiled at that, the first real smile I'd seen from him since this whole nightmare began. But then his expression grew serious again. Alex, the school board meeting is tonight, isn't it? What's going to happen to you and your friends? That was the question I'd been dreading. Because honestly, I had no idea. The hotel room felt smaller with 4 teenagers, 1 devastated teacher, and the weight of an entire community's judgment pressing down on us. Mr. Chen had been quiet for the past 10 minutes, scrolling through news articles on Emma's phone while mechanically eating pad thai that had gone cold an hour ago. There's going to be a counter-rally tomorrow morning, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. First Baptist, St. Matthew's Lutheran, and the Family Values Coalition. They're calling for my permanent removal from any position of influence over children in this district. My stomach clenched. Mr. Chen. Reverend Patterson gave a statement to Channel 7, he continued, reading from the screen. While we don't condone discrimination, we also cannot support the normalization of alternative lifestyles in our educational institutions. Parents have the right to ensure their children receive instruction that aligns with their family's moral framework. Emma made a disgusted sound. That's just fancy talk for homophobia. That's politics, Mr. Chen corrected sadly. And it's exactly why I should have stayed hidden in this room until my lease expired. You kids have put yourselves in the middle of something much bigger and more dangerous than you realize. What do you mean? Marcus asked, though I could hear the worry creeping into his voice. Mr. Chen set down the phone and looked at each of us in turn. Alex, your parents are both teachers in this district. If the school board decides to make an example of the students involved in today's disruption, it could affect their careers too. Emma, your mother works for the city planning department. Councilman Wright sits on that committee. Marcus, doesn't your dad's construction company bid on district maintenance contracts? The connections he was drawing made my blood run cold. Morrison hadn't just been targeting Mr. Chen, he'd been building a network of influence and intimidation that could reach into every family involved in our protest. Jake, Mr. Chen continued, your girlfriend who works in the main office. She's probably already been questioned about how students got access to confidential information. He used air quotes, but there was nothing sarcastic about his tone. Mrs. Rodriguez might have protected her by taking full responsibility, but that doesn't mean Jennifer's safe. Jake's phone buzzed at that exact moment. He glanced at it and went pale. She just texted. Morrison pulled her out of class for administrative questioning about security breaches in the main office. She's scared she's going to get expelled. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Mr. Chen said, standing up and starting to pace in the small space between the beds. Morrison might be suspended, but he's not gone. He still has allies on the school board, still has supporters in the community. And now he's wounded and angry, which makes him exponentially more dangerous. Emma's phone rang suddenly, making all of us jump. She looked at the caller ID and her face went white. It's my mom. Answer it, I said, though my voice came out shakier than I intended. Emma hit speakerphone. Her mother's voice filled the room, tight with barely controlled panic. Emma Catherine Rodriguez, where are you right now? I'm studying with friends, Mom. Why? Because Principal Morrison just called the house. He's claiming you and 3 other students illegally recorded him without consent and distributed the recording to incite a riot. He says you could be facing criminal charges for wiretapping and conspiracy to damage the reputation of a public official. The room went dead silent. Criminal charges. That was a possibility none of us had even considered. Mom, that's not. Come home. Right now. Your father and I need to decide whether we're hiring a lawyer or sending you to live with your aunt in San Antonio until this blows over. The call ended. Emma stared at her phone like it had just grown fangs. Mr. Chen sank back onto the bed, holding his head in his hands. God, what have I done? What have I let you kids do? You didn't let us do anything, I said firmly. We chose this. All of us. And now you might go to jail for it. Morrison's bluffing, Marcus said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as the rest of us. He can't actually press criminal charges for exposing the truth, can he? Mr. Chen looked up at us with eyes full of regret and something that looked disturbingly like goodbye. In Texas. Against minors who recorded a public official without his knowledge. Oh, he absolutely can. And if he's desperate enough, which he clearly is, he absolutely will. The silence in that hotel room stretched until it felt like a physical weight pressing down on all of us. Mr. Chen was staring at his hands, Emma looked like she might throw up, and I could practically hear Marcus's brain calculating worst-case scenarios. That's when Jake's phone rang again. It's my dad, he said, his voice barely steady as he answered. Hi, Dad, yeah, I heard about, what do you mean, cease and desist? He put it on speaker without asking permission, and suddenly we were listening to Jake's father, the lawyer who was supposed to protect us, delivering what sounded like our death sentence. Son, Morrison's attorney filed papers an hour ago. They're seeking restraining orders against 4 students, claiming harassment and conspiracy to defame. But that's not the worst part. His voice dropped. The school district's insurance company is demanding a full investigation. If they determine this was a coordinated attack on Morrison's character, they could deny coverage for any wrongful termination lawsuit Mr. Chen might file. Mr. Chen's head snapped up. What does that mean? Jake's dad continued, apparently hearing the question through the phone. It means if David Chen wants to sue the district for discrimination, he'll have to prove the students weren't acting on his behalf or with his knowledge. Otherwise, the insurance company will claim this whole thing was orchestrated retaliation, not legitimate whistleblowing. My stomach dropped into my shoes. So we didn't just fail to help Mr. Chen, we accidentally made it impossible for him to get justice through the courts. That's one possible interpretation, Jake's dad admitted. Morrison's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. He's setting up a scenario where either the students get prosecuted for conspiracy, or Mr. Chen gets painted as the mastermind behind a coordinated attack on a school administrator. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her mom, Channel 7 is in our driveway. Do not talk to reporters. It gets worse, Jake said quietly, reading something on his screen. Morrison just released a statement to the press. He's claiming the recording was selectively edited and taken out of context during a counseling session about maintaining appropriate boundaries with students. That's a complete lie, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I realized it didn't matter. Morrison was rewriting the narrative faster than we could keep up with it. Mr. Chen stood up abruptly and walked to the small window overlooking the highway. Jake, is your father still there? Yeah, Mr. Chen. Ask him about the whistleblower protection laws in Texas. Specifically, whether they apply to students who expose discrimination by school officials. There was muffled conversation on the other end of the line before Jake's dad came back on. The laws are complicated when minors are involved. And they typically require following official reporting procedures first, going through district administration, state education department, that sort of thing. Going straight to public exposure could actually undermine protection claims. So we're screwed, Marcus said flatly. Not necessarily, Mr. Chen said, turning back from the window. His expression had changed from defeated to something I couldn't quite read. Jake's father, what would happen if I voluntarily testified that the students acted without my knowledge, but that everything they revealed was accurate? David, no, Emma said immediately. You can't throw yourself under the bus to protect us. I'm not throwing myself under the bus. I'm taking back control of my own story. Mr. Chen's voice was getting stronger, more like the confident teacher who'd spent 4 years helping us find our voices. Morrison wants to make this about rebellious students manipulating a poor, vulnerable teacher. Fine. Let's give him exactly what he doesn't expect. Jake's dad was quiet for a moment. David, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, it's risky. Very risky. What's he thinking? I asked, though something in Mr. Chen's posture reminded me of the way he looked right before delivering a particularly powerful monologue. Mr. Chen smiled, the same smile he used to give us right before opening night when we were all terrified and convinced we'd forgotten every line. I'm thinking it's time I showed up to tonight's school board meeting. Emma shook her head frantically. Mr. Chen, that's exactly what Morrison wants. He'll have the whole room stacked with his supporters. It'll be a massacre. Maybe, Mr. Chen agreed. Or maybe it's time the community heard directly from the teacher they're all arguing about, instead of letting everyone else speak for me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Sarah. Using my sister's phone. My parents are sending me to St. Catherine's Academy next week. Private school, no drama department. I'm sorry, Alex. I tried to fight them but they won't listen. Don't let them win. I stared at the message, feeling something crack inside my chest. Sarah, brilliant, fierce Sarah who'd brought Lady Macbeth to life in ways that gave me chills, was being ripped away from everything she loved because we dared to fight back. Mr. Chen, I said quietly, if you go to that meeting tonight, what exactly are you planning to say? His smile widened, and for the first time since Tuesday, I saw the teacher who taught us that the most powerful performances come from absolute truth. I'm going to tell them a story about a group of students who love their teacher enough to risk everything for him, he said. And then I'm going to ask them what that says about the kind of education we're really providing at Lincoln High. The school board meeting was supposed to start at 7 p.m., but by 6:30, the parking lot looked like a small-scale political rally had exploded across Lincoln High. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray evening sky like mechanical flowers. Protesters with traditional values signs clustered near the main entrance, while counter-protesters with rainbow flags and support our teachers banners had claimed the area by the flagpole. I sat in Mr. Chen's Honda Civic, watching it all unfold through the windshield, my stomach churning with anxiety. Emma was in the passenger seat, obsessively refreshing her phone to track the hashtag Lincoln High Homophobia hashtag, which had somehow grown to 47,000 tweets in 8 hours. Marcus and Jake were in the back seat, both looking like they were heading to their own execution. There's Channel 7, Emma said, pointing to Jennifer Walsh setting up with her cameraman near the auditorium doors. And Channel 12. And, is that Channel 3 from Austin? Mr. Chen adjusted his rearview mirror, straightening the blue tie he'd borrowed from the hotel's lost and found box. He'd insisted on driving himself to the meeting, despite our protests that he should stay hidden until we knew how bad the legal situation really was. David Chen arriving at his own crucifixion, he murmured, then caught my worried look in the mirror. Sorry. Dark teacher humor. Occupational hazard. Mr. Chen, we can still turn around, I said for the dozenth time. Wait and see what happens. Let the lawyers figure this out. Alex, look at those protesters. Look at those news cameras. This isn't going away whether I'm here or not. He checked his watch, 6:47 p.m. At least this way, I get to speak for myself instead of letting Morrison control the narrative. Through the windshield, I spotted Principal Morrison emerging from a black SUV near the staff parking area. He was flanked by 2 men in expensive suits, his legal team, presumably, and walked with the confident stride of someone who believed he was about to win a decisive victory. Oh God, Emma whispered. There's Mrs. Henderson. And Superintendent Williams. Alex, half the district administration is here. She was right. The sidewalk was filling with people I recognized from school board photos and district newsletters. This wasn't just a routine personnel hearing, this had become a high-stakes political showdown with Mr. Chen's career and our futures hanging in the balance. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake's girlfriend Jennifer. Morrison called me and my parents into his office this afternoon. Made me sign a statement saying I never saw any students in restricted areas of the main office. I'm scared, Jake. He knows I'm lying but he's protecting me because it helps his case. What does that mean? Jake read the message over my shoulder and went pale. He's building a defense. Making sure there's no evidence we actually had unauthorized access to anything. Which means he's planning to claim we fabricated the whole thing, Marcus added grimly. Mr. Chen turned in his seat to face us fully. Kids, listen to me very carefully. Whatever happens in there tonight, I need you to promise me you'll let me handle this. No interrupting, no dramatic gestures, no trying to defend me. Can you do that? We nodded, though I could tell none of us really meant it. And if things go badly, if Morrison succeeds in turning this around somehow, I need you to know that these past 4 days have been the most proud I've ever been of any students I've taught. You saw an injustice and you acted on it, consequences be damned. That's exactly what I always hoped drama class would teach you about finding your voice. At exactly 6:55 p.m., he opened his car door. Showtime, he said softly, and we followed our teacher toward the most important performance of any of our lives. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and crowding into the aisles despite fire safety regulations. The air thrummed with tension and barely contained anger from both sides. I counted at least 6 news cameras positioned around the room, their red recording lights casting an eerie glow over the assembled crowd. Mrs. Henderson called the meeting to order at 7:03 p.m., her voice barely audible over the murmur of 400 people trying to whisper at once. Tonight's emergency session will address the personnel matter regarding David Chen, as well as concerns raised about student conduct and administrative procedures at Lincoln High School. Morrison sat at the defendant's table with his 2 lawyers, looking calm and collected. He'd changed into a different suit, charcoal gray instead of navy, and had somehow managed to project an aura of wounded dignity rather than desperate panic. The man was a better actor than I'd given him credit for. Before we begin testimony, Mrs. Henderson continued, I want to remind everyone that this is a formal hearing, not a public forum. Only individuals called to testify may speak. That's when Mr. Chin stood up from his seat in the third row. Madam Chair, I'd like to request permission to address the board. A ripple of shocked whispers ran through the crowd. Morrison's head snapped around, his composure cracking for just a moment before he whispered something urgent to his lead attorney. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Henderson said carefully, you're not required to testify on your own behalf. In fact, your legal counsel would probably advise against. I don't have legal counsel, Mr. Chen interrupted politely. And I believe the community deserves to hear directly from me about what happened, rather than having my story told secondhand by others. One of Morrison's lawyers shot to his feet. Your Honor, Madam Chair, allowing the terminated employee to make an unsworn statement without cross-examination would be highly irregular and potentially prejudicial to our client's rights. Your client. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. Mr. Morrison, you're represented by private counsel at a public school board meeting? Morrison leaned forward to his microphone. Given the seriousness of the allegations being made against my character and professional conduct, I felt it necessary to protect my reputation and my family's well-being. That was a mistake. I could see it immediately in the board members' faces, the subtle shift from neutral arbiters to people wondering why a school principal needed expensive lawyers to defend firing a drama teacher for budget reasons. Mr. Chen stepped forward. I waive any right to cross-examination. I simply want 5 minutes to tell you what actually happened last Tuesday evening, and why I believe the students who brought this to light deserve praise, not punishment. Mrs. Henderson conferred quietly with the other board members while Morrison's lawyers huddled frantically around their client. In the audience, I spotted my parents sitting with worried expressions, Sarah's empty seat between them a stark reminder of what we'd already lost. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Henderson finally said, you may address the board for 5 minutes. Please approach the podium. As Mr. Chen walked down the center aisle, the auditorium fell completely silent except for the mechanical hum of news cameras adjusting their focus. He reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out over the crowd of parents, students, and community leaders who'd spent the day arguing about his worth as a human being. My name is David Chen, he began, his voice steady and clear. I've been a teacher for 8 years, the last 5 here at Lincoln High. And I'm gay. The simple statement hit the room like a thunderbolt. Several people gasped audibly. Morrison's face went ashen. And in that moment, I realized Mr. Chen had just done something that would change everything. He'd taken control of his own story by refusing to let anyone else define him. The silence that followed Mr. Chen's declaration stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. Last Tuesday at 6:30 p.m., I introduced my partner of 3 years to Principal Morrison in the school parking lot. By 8 a.m. Wednesday morning, I was terminated. Not for budget reasons, the district approved a $47,000 increase for arts programs just last Friday. I was fired because Principal Morrison decided my personal life made me unsuitable to teach your children. Morrison's lawyer tried to stand, but Mrs. Henderson waved him down with a sharp gesture. The students who exposed this truth, Alex Morrison, Emma Rodriguez, Marcus Williams, and Jake Patterson, they didn't do it because I asked them to. They didn't even tell me they were planning it. They did it because they understood something that apparently some adults have forgotten, that discrimination is wrong, regardless of who commits it or what justification they use. Mr. Chen paused, looking directly at Morrison. These students risk suspension, expulsion, and now apparently criminal charges, not to attack anyone, but to stand up for what's right. If that's the kind of character our educational system produces, then we're succeeding beyond our wildest dreams. He turned back to the board. The question before you tonight isn't whether David Chen should keep his job. It's whether Lincoln High School will be a place where all students, including the ones who are gay, questioning, different, or just brave enough to speak truth to power, can feel safe and supported. The auditorium erupted. Half the crowd was on their feet applauding, while the other half shouted in opposition. Mrs. Henderson banged her gavel repeatedly, but the chaos continued until Morrison himself stood up and approached his microphone. That's enough, he said, his voice cutting through the noise. The room gradually quieted, everyone sensing that the real confrontation was finally about to begin. Mr. Chen is right about one thing, Morrison continued, his composure completely restored. This is about character. It's about the character we expect from the people we entrust with our children's moral development. He gestured toward where we sat in the fourth row. Those students didn't expose discrimination, they perpetrated deception. They illegally recorded a private conversation, manipulated evidence, and orchestrated a public attack designed to destroy my reputation and career. Morrison's confidence was returning, and I could see him gaining momentum. This isn't about tolerance or acceptance. This is about 4 teenagers who decided they knew better than the adults charged with running this institution, and who were willing to break the law to impose their will on the entire community. Several parents nodded agreement. Morrison was doing exactly what Mr. Chen had predicted, turning this into a story about rebellious students rather than discriminatory administrators. That's when Superintendent Williams, who'd been silent throughout the hearing, finally spoke. Principal Morrison, I have one question for you. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the suddenly still auditorium. Did you or did you not tell the district office that Mr. Chen was terminated for creating an unsafe environment through promotion of alternative lifestyle choices? Morrison's face went white. That email was taken out of context. It's a yes or no question, Principal Morrison. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, Morrison's shoulders sagged. Yes. Then you lied to this board, you lied to the community, and you discriminated against an employee based on sexual orientation. Superintendent Williams turned to Mrs. Henderson. I move for Principal Morrison's immediate termination and Mr. Chen's full reinstatement with back pay. The motion passed 6-1. 3 weeks later, Mr. Chen was back in our classroom, helping us prepare for the spring production of the Laramie Project, a choice that surprised no one. Morrison had resigned rather than face termination, and the Character and Values Initiative had been quietly shelved. But the real victory wasn't in the board meeting or the news coverage or even getting our teacher back. It was in the announcement that came over the intercom on April 15th, delivered in Mrs. Rodriguez's familiar voice. Good morning, Lincoln High. Today marks the launch of our new Safe Schools initiative, designed to ensure that every student, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, or gender identity, feels welcomed and supported in our educational community. Because as recent events have reminded us, the most important lesson we can teach is that standing up for what's right isn't just encouraged here, it's expected. Sometimes the most important announcements aren't the ones that change everything at once. Sometimes they're the ones that finally acknowledge what should have been true all along.